All right, hello and welcome. It is, Monday, June 27th. My name is Christopher Latham. I am the course director for game music composition, and I will be hanging out with you throughout the month. So we have a lot of very cool stuff to talk about over the course of the month. This afternoon session is going to be mostly an overview and an introduction to the class and the material. And we will be spending some time in the second half going over your first week's assignments and taking some time to go through those in detail and kind of get you set up for the month overall. We have lots of different topics to cover. We've got our Monday and Wednesday classes set up for this time, and if you are unable to make it, we will be posting up the archives certainly by the next day. Hopefully I can get them encoded and uploaded by that evening, but more than likely they'll show up the next day as announcements on FSO. And our Monday classes are going to be mostly a discussion of the new week's assignments. So we'll go over the new stuff and then also take some time to go back over the previous week's assignments. So starting next Monday, you will have completed... Actually, no, that's not true at all because we have the summer break in there. So let me readdress the dates and the break coming up. So we have a much well-deserved and needed summer break for July 4th or in and around July 4th coming up next week. So we fill you full with all sorts of new information here, and then we take a break for a week, and we'll resume. Make sure I get my dates correct here. Let's see, where's my nearest calendar? We will resume the next Monday, and that means that there will be no class from the 4th, Monday the 4th through the Sunday the 10th. So we will reconvene on July 11th. That means the first week's assignments will be due by Sunday, but I probably will open up or I have set it up actually, to open up the week 2 assignments over the holiday break. If you would like to get a head start on those will be available. And the rest of our Monday sessions will start out with a discussion of the new assignments, but in the second half, you will have turned in at least your first week's round of assignments, and we'll progress forward similarly through the rest of the month, and we'll take the opportunity to take a listen to them and do a bit of peer review. So there is an assignment on FSO that is an unweighted open assignment that allows you to submit your session for a review live in the class. We want to make sure that we can take a look at all of the different approaches and address in a kind of video fashion be able to go over in detail your particular approach to the project in the sessions. So everybody will receive individual feedback and a grade sheet written in a written form, but if you are able to make the live sessions, then you can ask questions and we can interact and go back and forth and address anything. But even if you are unavailable to make the live sessions, you can still submit your project, and I will review it, and you can check it out at a later time. So it's a great way for, well, number one, for the individual to get individualized feedback and be able to discuss and talk about it. But for everybody else, it gives you an opportunity to see how other people are approaching the project. People will do things both right and wrong that you would never kind of even have thought of or expected. So it gives us a great kind of wide variety of points to discuss about how people are working on the projects. So, and then the general flow of the class, or at least the projects that you're working on, is each week you have a new game project that you will be completing the music and the sound effects to over the course of the month. So if you haven't already, go ahead and check out the week 1 assignments on FSO and download. Of course, it's just now Monday afternoon, so certainly may have not gotten a chance to do that, but as soon as you can, go ahead and download all of the material for week 1 and kind of start going through it and certainly play and check out the game each week that you will be working on. We have a different game, a fully working Mac game that you will be creating the music soundtrack for and also completing all of the sound effects. So by the end of the month, you will have 3 completely functioning Mac games that have your custom soundtrack, music and sound effects. So 3 different games, 3 different musical approaches. They all obviously they all need audio files or WAV files, but how those WAV files are used and how you build them and how the game interacts with them will be unique each week. So our Monday classes are a review of those new assignments, and that's what we will be doing here for week 1 in a little bit. And then also going back and taking a listen to everybody's submitted projects from the previous week. Our Wednesday classes are more open to different topics of the industry, different compositional approaches. In the beginning half of the month, kind of in the first 2 weeks or so, is more of the creative approach. How do you find clients and find game projects to work on, interface and work with a game team, the kind of the role of a music composer in a game, what sort of skills do you bring to the table, what is expected of you as a music composer, what's kind of the day-to-day workflow or work environment that a music composer operates in, and who do you work with, who do you work for, who has creative control, who signs the paychecks, kind of the overall structure. Then we'll talk about how do you get started on a new game project, how do you figure out what music do you need, how much music do you need, where does it all go, how do you kind of follow the overall arc and creative direction of the game. We'll talk a lot about what is unique and different about music for games, and what is also very much the same as production of music for any other media and platform. Music for a game the final music that you hear, music and sound effects that you hear in a game, does not exist until you actually play the game. It's different in some ways to a movie or film or television or a music album. When you go into the studio and you record your music, then you work on it, you loop it over and over again, you listen to it, you mix it, you record it, you mix it, you master it, and you create this perfect stereo mix that goes on your album, or maybe in a movie, it's a 2-hour-long 5.1 surround mix that is heard by everybody that watches that movie or listens to that music album. But in a game, the music doesn't exist in its final form until somebody plays the game. We'll talk about the difference between the linear and non-linear approach of the music in the game. When you watch a movie, there is a 2-hour-long audio file that is the exact length of the movie. You rewind it and play it back, and it plays back the exact same way every single time. There's a car chase and an explosion and a fight scene and a drama and comedy and all of those. Every single time you watch it, it's going to be the exact same way. But the music for a game does not exist in one 2-hour-long file or however long the game is. People get lost in games for 10, 20, 50, 100 hours or even some much, much longer than that. So the game and the music has to extend and work against a soundtrack or an experience, gameplay that can last for a very long time. And that doesn't mean that you have 50 hours of music on the game disc somewhere, or that there is a 50-hour long audio file that plays from beginning to end as you experience and play through the game. Music for a video game exists in lots of little pieces and parts that loop and play through one time and switch and transition and change in reaction to the action that's going on screen. It is an interactive form. It is a non-linear form, meaning that the interactivity means that there is control given up to the player. When you listen to a music album, you hit play on your music player, and you sit back and you listen to the music, and it's kind of a one-way directional experience. But with a video game, there's that feedback loop of the game starts and the player hits buttons on their controller or their keyboard or something like that, and the game reacts, and the music and audio and graphics all change, and then the game changes, and so the player reacts to those changes, and the game reacts to the player, and it just goes around and around and around, constantly developing over time. And so hopefully even the experience that I experience playing a video game versus the experience that you play or anybody else plays should be different or unique, or even sometimes slightly different, or sometimes very, very different, especially in newer, larger, more modern games. The experience can feel really kind of vast and wide open. And so we'll talk about how do you build a music soundtrack for a game where you don't ultimately know what's going to happen. You know what's possible in the game. Like if you think about, there's certainly some big, massive games out there. Let's see, there's the Elder Scrolls series with like Skyrim, that's certainly huge. There's the Rockstar Games does amazing stuff with Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption and massive open world games. You've got World of Warcraft or League of Legends or just any of these games where you have a very, very large open experience. We'll talk about we'll talk about all sorts of different types of games, but each one of them has their own musical approach. And so you don't know, you know what is possible because ultimately somebody made the game. You're part of the game team that made it, so you know everything that is generally possible. And you know the what, you know where everything is. But you don't know when. You don't know when anything is going to happen. And so we'll talk about how do you create a music soundtrack when you don't know what's about to happen. And we'll have different games that have different approaches to the music that resemble the types of things that you might encounter out there. So fully working game projects with your own custom sounds. Each week they will require their own unique approach to the music. I was also talking about, so the first 2 weeks are a bit more of the creative side. How do you craft the soundtrack? How do you build start out with tracks in your DAW, building your music, being able to format it, bounce it, prepare it to work in either a game console or a PC or Mac or iOS or Android or all these different multiple platforms that people play games on. And prepare your music, and then eventually you have a folder filled with WAV files. And this, most folks making music and composing know how to make the music, know how to create the WAV files, know how to compose and mix and produce and actually create the product. But once they have the finished WAV files, you have a folder filled with all these little pieces and parts. How does it actually get into the game? And so towards the second half of the month, we'll kind of switch directions into more of the technical side of how do you take your WAV files and actually get them into the game, so when somebody hits a button or moves a joystick or controller, the correct piece of music plays and the correct thing happens. We'll talk about how the game interacts with the music, in which it also the player interacts with the game and the music, and how it all kind of works together. So those are some of the big kind of general topics that we will be hitting on through the month. Talk a little bit. We talked a little bit about the class itself. We'll get into the assignments here in a little bit. One thing that I want to address pretty early on in our first session here is a couple of disclaimers about the class overall, just things to pay attention to and watch out for. Number one is you don't actually have to be any good at video games to be successful in this class. Your skills at playing video games or your experience with video games has no bearing on your ability to be successful in this class. We're certainly not grading you on your highest score, or your fastest time, or how you actually play the game or anything like that. Because that's not what you're there for. Certainly you are the music composer. The skills that are required of you are the skills that you've been building throughout the entire degree program. Your understanding of music theory and composition and production of music, understanding your tools that you have access to, your DAW and your synths and your sample libraries, and the ability to record and mix and automate and format and bounce and just kind of get the whole finished project together that meets the requirements that the game developer needs for their soundtrack. When working with a game team, they probably don't understand the language of music sometimes at all, or certainly not to the degree that you do, just in the same way that you don't understand programming and game design in the same way that they do. But everybody is a professional in their own kind of skill set and their own job, and they bring their skills to the table, and the skills that are required of you is the creation and production of the soundtrack. So that's what is required of you throughout the projects each week. If you don't play video games, haven't played video games, so certainly understand that there are those coming through this degree program and thus the class. There are those that eat, live, and breathe video games, and they are up on all the newest and latest stuff, and they know all the new games that just came out on E3 last month, and up on the technology and the industry and what's going on. They're interested on heading down this path, and that is completely awesome, because I can nerd out with you all day long on video games and tech and audio and all that stuff. But I also understand that there are folks coming through the class that haven't touched a video game since they were maybe throwing quarters in Pac-Man or playing Solitaire or Minesweeper on their computer. And that's perfectly fine also. Because, again, what is required of you is your skills as a composer, musician, a music producer. So that's number one disclaimer, is that you don't have to actually be any good at video games to be successful in this class. Now, while you are in this class, we will completely immerse you in games and game technology and the game industry, and we'll be talking about all sorts of stuff and with examples. And if you don't have any games, we give you games to play, so while you are here, we will certainly be all about discussing the games industry, but understand that there are certainly a wide variety of different experiences with games previous. So that's number one. Number two disclaimer that is often a question that I get pretty early on is, do I have to be able to code or program to be able to be a music composer or work in the games industry? And that is a pretty big no overall. There is certainly a technical aspect to the entire process, but more than likely, as a music composer, you are not going to be required to open up a text file and just start pounding away and creating code. There is a technical aspect to this entire process, and you are ultimately, it's a piece of software, and It's a game, and it is code. There are teams of programmers that are working with the code, making it do all sorts of amazing things, and that interacts with your music and your files. But your job is creating the music soundtrack. Now, there are certainly folks that over their career, they start learning more and more about the tech and get involved. It's kind of like there are some session musicians that spend their entire life on one side of the glass. And they are the drummer, they're the session keyboardist, they're guitarist, vocalist, whatever it is. And they are just focused entirely on the music itself. But there are also artists that get interested in what happens in the control room, what's going on with the microphones and the signal path, preamps and compressors and EQs and racks of outboard gear and the DAW and the tape machine and the actual technology that's involved in the recording session or the mixing session. And so there, certainly with music itself, there is a technical aspect. There is a large creative portion to it, and then there is also a technical aspect to it all. So same thing with games. There's a lot of folks that start out and maybe their entire career just make and compose music for video games. They finish with the WAV files, they deliver it to the game team. This is most of the, well, not most, but often how things are done, where your job is over when you deliver the approved audio files. And then they take those audio files and they put them into the game, they hook them up to the code, and when the game plays, it plays the correct audio files. But it's kind of like giving your music up to somebody else to mix. You give them the raw WAV files, and then the game can do all sorts of things with how the file plays, how the music plays, and what order does it play, how does it all shuffle and rearrange, and the mix and the levels and the sequence. So there's a lot of things that are kind of still given up to the game, and ultimately nobody more or better than you is going to know about how the music is supposed to work in the game. So some composers start learning the technology and some of the software. We'll talk about some of the technology that is used in audio for video games and music. We'll talk about audio middleware. We will talk about game engines. We'll talk about how the music is set up and working in our games. So there will be a technical aspect to it overall, but there is a lot of care in the industry to make sure that all of the creative folks, which are the composers and the sound designers and the graphics artists, the people that do graphics, 2D art and 3D art and animations and motion capture and environments and creatures and weapons and vehicles, those folks don't know code just as much as we don't know code. And there's a lot of tools and processes to make sure that the creative folks are just being creative, and the programmers and technical folks are doing the technical side. So we'll talk about how all of that works together. But ultimately, no, you don't need to be able to code massive amounts of C++ to be able to be a composer in the games industry. Now, of course, if you have those skills, there's certainly nothing wrong with having those skills, and can make you even more valuable. We have one of the former audio directors at EA Sports, came through, or still does come through Full Sail every once in a while to talk to our audio students. And it's a common question: do I need to be able to program in order to work in the games industry? And he says, if you can make sound effects, that is very valuable in the industry. If you can make sound effects and compose music, then that's much more valuable. Kind of be able to do all aspects of the audio. If you can do sound effects, music, and program and code, then you're pretty much a unicorn, because often those people don't really exist, because those are often lifelong paths of knowledge, the creative music composition and theory, and computer science and programming. So Very rarely do they really cross streams or need to in the games industry overall. So that's my not so short answer to that. So that's my disclaimers. Number one, you don't actually have to be any good skills actually playing video games to be successful in this class, and you certainly don't need to be a programmer to be a successful game composer. So let's see. That's most of my overview of the class. I talked about the lectures and how those kind of work, or Monday and Wednesday night sessions. Again, the archives will be posted up then on Tuesday and Thursday, the day after these are completed. And talked about those, talked about the class. All right. Myself, where did I go? There we go. Chris Latham, course director for game music composition. I have been with Full Sail for about 14 years now, something like that, 14. And I started out over in the recording arts department before there was a music production department. Started out in the studios, on the consoles. My history before Full Sail was more in the production side of things, production world, radio and television production, commercial production, music, dialogue, sound effects, that sort of thing. And then came to Full Sail. Like I said, worked in the studios, on the consoles. Then Full Sail got on the game audio train. We created a class for game audio. I don't know, that's been about 7 or 8 years now. And then this game music composition class came online when the music production degree came around. I don't know, that's been about 5 years now, let's say. So a wide variety of different topics. Whatever you're interested in discussing, go ahead and reach out to me. Let's see, iChat and email. These are going to be the two best ways of getting in contact with me. I am not at my desk phone on Mondays and Wednesdays because I'm teaching the class. So if you call, then leave me a message. But if you get my voicemail, then certainly send me an email. I can probably respond to that a lot faster, or we can set up a time to actually chat on voice chat on GoToTraining or whatever it is. Beyond Full Sail, I have a game audio contracting company with Engine Audio, or called Engine Audio. We basically do audio and music, dialogue, sound effects, game implementation, the tech, whatever the client needs for the games industry. We have EA Sports or Tiburon Studios here in Orlando, so we're working with them currently. Madden 17 is coming out here, no surprise, in the fall with football season. And so they are now just moving the entire, well, not just moving, but entirely moving everything to the PS4 and Xbox One. So that puts everything on Blu-ray discs. And so there's a massive amount of space for these games, which means a whole lot more recorded dialogue. So we're working with the new announcers for Madden football, editing all of their dialogue and getting it kind of processed and ready for the game. Also work on a game, doing all the sound effects and working with the musicians for depth. We've worked with EA on a couple of years here on their football titles, their basketball titles, golf titles, and so a wide variety of different types of things out there. Again, whatever you are interested in the industry, let me know, and there's certainly all sorts of additional material that I can throw your direction, and lots of aspects of the industry to talk about. So Overall, the goals of the class, number one, of course, is writing music. That's kind of the point why you are here throughout the degree program. A number one is to be building out your portfolio and demo reel with as much material that you've worked on over the course of the degree. And this month we have 3 different game projects that by the end will have your music, your sound effects, and yes, you will have the actual working Mac application, but you will also be creating video captures that you can post and share very easily. So again, number one is writing music. Number two is playing video games. It's a very important task and very valuable and very necessary to keep up with what's going on in the industry. And so I have a very important concept in this class called game research. And game research means you should be playing video games. And that is a very necessary part of the whole gig, where this is very much the case in whatever part of the industry you want to work in. If you want to be in the music industry, if you want to be a musician or a producer or a songwriter, you should be paying attention to the music industry. You should be listening to lots of music, paying attention to the artists and the producers and the record labels and the production companies, recording engineers, mixing engineers, where they did it, how they did it, any sort of information that you can find, paying attention to the charts and who's popular and why is it popular and who's successful and why are they successful, and just kind of paying attention to your industry. If you're interested in the film industry, you need to be watching tons of films. You need to have a language of film. You need to have a reference and kind of understand the ideas and the history of films when clients refer to them. Clients only speak in the language of previous projects, meaning that musicians speak in terms of previous albums. Listen to that artist, or listen to this album, and really, did you hear that drum sound, or did you hear that transition, or that chorus or verse? That's kind of what we want, what the direction we're going for in our music. Or in film, watch films and understand and pay attention to the industry. Who is the director, the producer, the actors, the production company. There's tons of behind the scenes stuff that you can get your hands on. So the composer, of course. And just so happens in video games, it's playing video games. So that means you should be playing video games, paying attention to the games. Certainly, yes, they're fun and enjoyable to play, but also analytically paying attention to the soundtrack and the audio and how it moves and switches and transitions in relation to the actions that you do in the game. So hopefully you have access to games. If you maybe you have a game console, you certainly have your Mac laptop. There's a store out there called Steam store that is filled with all sorts of video games. There's Mac video games on there. You can go to the App Store for games. There's free games. Right now is the Steam summer sale, and it's games are super, super cheap. If you haven't ever checked out the Steam store, it's kind of a fun thing to play with. And so, playing video games, paying attention to video games. If anybody's asking you why you are playing more video games this month, you say it is game research. And so, very important aspect to any part of the industry that you are in. And so, along with all of this music writing and video game playing, there will be a lot to learn. It is a challenging task of understanding how all this stuff pieces and works together. Not only is there the compositional aspects of the music, the production aspects, but there is the interactivity with the game itself. How does your music actually perform and work in the game? You do not have ultimate control of how your music operates in the game. And so we'll talk about different ideas and workflows and approaches to how that can work together. All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to take a quick pause here before I get into our next topic. which is how to be successful in this class. Step one, don't fail. And we'll talk about, we'll start getting into the assignments, the actual material for the class. So let me take a quick pause here. Hold on. All right, let's see. So, guaranteeing success in this class, or being successful in this class. There's a couple of approaches that will certainly get you on the path to a overall success in the class. And that is number one, download all of the materials for the class as soon as you can. Check out all of the assignments, kind of map out and determine your overall approach for the assignments, and see if you can come up with any sort of issues or questions as early on through the month or through the week as you can, so that you can reach out, we can discuss, we can fix, we can work our way or kind of troubleshoot our way through any sort of issue if we encounter them. So there is a technical aspect to the class, meaning that it is games, they're software, they're applications. So there are possibilities that things don't work correctly, or they don't work with your operating system or your computer, or I don't know, some sort of tech issue overall. So if you can run into those and have those issues, download and open up all the apps and play the games and just make sure things work, then we can address those and fix anything. There's always other options if we encounter really big issues, but most of the time I have a very high percentage of success in getting all of this stuff to work and function. So encountering any sort of issues when working on a game, this is very much a constant reality, because when you are working on the game, you are working on a broken game for months on end while the game is in production. Even after the game is released, we know that games aren't, or application software isn't perfect. There's bugs and there's crashes. Companies release updates and downloads and all sorts of things to fix these bugs. And so certainly while you are working on the game, it's in production, things aren't built, and things crash and burn. And so dealing with sort of technical issues is a part of it overall. It's the troubleshooting, the play testing aspects of game development. So number one, download and check everything out and run into any issues as soon as possible. Number two is revision assignments. Each week, starting in weeks 2, 3, and 4, you have the ability to revise any of the assignments from the previous week. So you have week 1, week 2, and week 3 revision opportunities. That means each week you have 2 or 3 assignments, graded assignments, that you can update and change after you get the grade sheet and the feedback. So generally the way it'll work is all of your assignments are due by Sunday, Sunday night at midnight at the end of week 1 and week 2 and so on. And then they are submitted and delivered. I download them, go through and grade them, provide feedback, and then you take the grades and grade sheets and feedback and you make any changes or updates necessary for your submissions, and then you resubmit them to the revision assignment. And then I'll go back through and grade the updates, because music for video games is definitely kind of a back and forth process. Very rarely do you knock it out of the park the first time, every single time. So it is a process of revisions. It goes back and forth with the client. A lot of times the client can't fully express what they actually mean or what they intend, and so you kind of throw something against the wall and see what sticks, and they go, yes, hey, I like more of this or less of that, and you kind of narrow it down and keep revising it until you get the final approved version of it. So revisions, very necessary opportunities. If you will going a couple different ways here. The first reason for revisions is that it does update and improve your grade, right? Sometimes the first round of submissions, you may not receive the grade that you are ultimately happy with, and so you make the changes, you take the grades and the feedback, and you resubmit it. And then it can easily have a pretty large point swing in the positive direction after the revision. But ultimately, it improves your composition, it improves your project, it improves your demo reel or portfolio, because nobody's going to ask you what grade you got on your week 1 composition in your game music class, but people will want to see the video and want to see the actual project, and you want to be able to show off the best work that you can. So revisions are entirely optional, but very much or very highly encouraged, because the people that do have success in this class ultimately do the revisions. So those are the best ways of being successful on the assignments over the course of the month. Please reach out to me if you have any sort of issues. We can address any sort of technical troubles or creative troubles or whatever it is. Here's a general flow of the or breakdown of the grades each week. That all adds up to 25%. And so your game composition, we have game compositions in week 1, 2, and 3. We don't have a new composition in week 4 because we don't have a week 5 to do revisions. So week 4, you are rounding out your week 3 revisions. And there is a new composition there also. But each week your game composition is pretty much your bigger project overall. Sometimes the technical assignments and the production technique kind of are related to or based off of it. And we'll talk about all the different types of games that you'll be working on. Your technical assignment is doing something technical with all of the audio that you created from your composition, or it's doing the sound design for the game. So each week, each week you will complete the musical soundtrack for the new game. Week 1, you do week 1 game. Week 2, you revise the week 1 music and you do the sound effects for that game. Week 2, you work on week 2 music, and then week 3, you do revisions and sound effects for that game. And kind of progresses through in that format throughout the month. The production technique is some techniques that will help you in the production of your music for a video game. Some specific techniques that are unique towards games. Like this week, it's a looping assignment. Music loops are a very important aspect of production of music for video games. Using a loop allows you to basically stay in one place musically as it loops around and around. You kind of wait there for a little bit before something happens in the game and you transition, you move on to the next thing. Each week there is a 20-question quiz, so there's 5%. Those are generally based off of the Wednesday classes and the slides and the presentation there. So you can get access to the slide PDFs and probably do most of the quizzes each week, or you can ask me any questions in the session and clarify anything that's necessary. There is a discussion question this week that asks basically your experience with games. What's your favorite game? What's your maybe favorite musical experience in a game? Just so I can get a sense of everybody's experience with games for the class. So that is generally how it will break down over the course of the month. What's coming up here? All right, let's actually get into the games themselves and start talking about the assignments. So your first game this week is a game called 2D Platformer. And it is made by Unity Games. And we will talk about Unity Games and the Unity game engine. We'll talk about different game engines over the course of the month. And there is two of the most popular ones that we will refer or discuss is the Unity game engine and the Unreal game engine. There's a lot of video games out there that are powered by those game engines. That's kind of like saying saying Unity and Unreal is kind of like saying Pro Tools and Logic. It is the main software that is used to make your game. So a game engine makes the game is the tools, the software that makes the game, just in the same way that your DAW is the tools or software that you use to make your music. So the Unity game company, they're based out of, or Unity Games, they're based out of San Francisco, and they make tools for people to make games. If you play a lot of online games, or not online, sorry, if you play a lot of mobile games on iOS or Android, then you've probably played a Unity or a game built in the Unity game engine. So they released this game called 2D Platformer to show off the capabilities of their game engine and kind of give an example and a demonstration of what's going on. So let me, instead of staring at the static picture, here is a 2D Platformer. Actually, there we go. Start right here. Powered by Unity. To show you this is the actual game engine, the software that is made by everything, and they're actually the people that create the game itself. So 2D Platformer is a platform game, meaning that it is based off of running and jumping between different platforms and shooting your bazooka there. And it's a pretty ridiculous concept here. You are a bean with a top hat and a bazooka. Actually, I think you have a bowler hat. With a monocle and a mustache, and there is an alien invasion. I think the aliens have taken over London. I believe, the alien ship has crashed into the London Bridge, which has fallen down. There is the Big Ben over here and the London Eye, and these are all the little aliens that are invading. And of course, you are a being that can save the day by defeating all of the aliens. And so this game was created and developed and kind of distributed for free. It's available for everybody to get into and tear apart and see how it all works. But there was no music in it. Actually, there was a music track, but it was just one file that looped around and around and around. So we built a music system that switches and changes according to what is going on in the game. So you will create music for this particular game, and we'll talk about how that music is going to be set up and actually used. So along with, when you download this assignment, you get the game itself. Let's see here. Open this up. All right, when you download everything, you get the game itself. And if you double click and launch it, it brings up this window, and you can change the size of the window. You can make it like play in a window or play full screen. You probably don't have to mess with the graphics quality. It's not a very highly powerful graphics game there. So You should be able to use it on whatever setting. And you hit play and play the actual game. You also get this movie file, so that you don't always have to play the game. You can just watch the video. And a couple of PDFs. And so there is the grade sheet. Oops, where'd that go? Hold on. Here we go. Oops. The grade sheet that looks like this. There we go. You get a grade sheet that looks like this, and I'll talk about the grade sheet as we get into the feedback and you deliver everything and in a later class. But you also get a music design document or a PDF that discusses the assignment as a whole. And there's a lot of information in here. The project overview setting is a lot of what I'm discussing right now. Game overview talks about the type of game it is. The original, 2D platformer games have a long pedigree in the industry. Classics like Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, Metroid were all 2D platformer games. Modern varieties like Limbo, Braid, or Jetpack Joyride. Basically running around, jumping and shooting. There's a lot of very common games out there like this. And the musical style. Certainly you notice that the game is kind of silly and ridiculous. It is a whole bunch of cute little aliens attacking and a bean defending the London Bridge. And so I've really left the musical style open to you. Whatever direction or instrumentation, musical approach that you would like to take with this one. The rest of our games throughout the month will get a bit more specific in their kind of genre and style. But I also, some suggestions here, maybe a little bit of, could have a bit of British influence along with that kind of wacky silliness overall. So, and I have a little bit of the sort of alien invasion sort of theme to it. Monty Python meets Mars Attacks or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers. Make it kind of a good variety of styles overall. But it certainly need core elements. You need drums, progression, pattern. You need a harmonic progression, chord progression, bass line, and a strong melody. We'll talk about how melody and the development of your music throughout the game. This is really where I want to get access to the asset list. Very important, very handy list. And you should always reference this as you are creating the music for the game. So ultimately, you will be delivering 9 WAV files. With the final submission, the final result or thing that you create, your soundtrack for the game is made up of 9 individual WAV files. And the game will play those WAV files and shuffle them and rearrange them according to the action that is happening on the screen. They are divided into 3 categories. You have 3 intro files, music _intro _01, 02, and 03. You have 3 main loop files, music main loop _01, 02, and 03, and then 3 ending files, music ending _01, 02, and 03. Now, the names of these files is very, very important because the game is expecting and looking for files named exactly that. It doesn't know that you misspelled it or that you missed an underscore or you missed a capitalization or something like that. It's just not going to work overall in the game. So following the formatting of the files is extremely important. So they have to be named this way. They all have to be 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. The 3 main loop files are going to be set up to loop, and we'll talk about looping files here in a little bit. And then the intros and the endings just play one time, so they do not loop. You'll notice that the intros and the endings are each 2 bars long, and the main loops are 8 bars long. And so let's talk about how the music actually is functioning in the game. Let's see. Let's go back to that video. Where'd that go? Okay. So we have intros, main loops, and endings. And right now you won't be able to hear anything as I kind of talk my way through it, but I'll have examples, and we'll play some student examples here in just a moment. But when the game starts, right there, when Mr. Bean here drops down and hits the ground, the intro is going to play. One of the three intros. Now, the game knows that there are supposed to be there are going to be three intro files. They're going to be named exactly this, and the game can randomly choose between 01, 02, or 03. And so when the game starts, it randomly chooses, let's say it goes for music underscore intro underscore 03. And it plays that for 2 bars. And the game doesn't know anything about your music, doesn't know the tempo or the time signature of it. It just knows when it stops and ends. And so when it ends, when music intro 03, the file is over, then the game will go to the main loops. Now, most of your music soundtrack for the game is made up of these 3 main loops. And they are each 8 bars long, and for as long as the game is being played, they will just randomly shuffle and switch around. So the game might start by choosing main loop 02, and it plays for 8 bars, and then it chooses main loop 01, and it plays for 8 bars, and then it goes to 03 for 8 bars, then it goes and plays 03 again for 8 bars, and it can play any one of the 3 files. And it can also repeat, like one can play and then it can play again, or so pretty much in any sort of random order, those files can play. So let me go back here. Intro starts playing. Intro plays for 2 bars. After 2 bars, it chooses one of the main loops, plays through that for 8 bars. Chooses another main loop, plays through that for 8 bars, and just keeps going around and around for as long as the game goes on. And there isn't an ending to the game. It's not really a finished, completed game. The score just keeps going up and up and up, and you'll notice that there's a little health bar at the top of the bean here. He shoots rockets and gets points for shooting the aliens here, and there's also power-ups for bombs. They can drop bombs. There's also health power-ups so that he can get some of his health bar back. But eventually, you're going to run out of all of the health points, and you're going to lose the life. Mr. Bean's going to lose a life, and the game will start all over again. And so, let's see, where is it? Right about... where'd he go? Okay. So notice right here, he's got little to nothing left. And as soon as he gets hit one more time, then he kind of drops down into the toxic sludge below, and the music switches immediately. So I've been playing for 2 or 3 minutes there, and then all of a sudden I lose all of my health points. Whichever main loop it was immediately stops, and it switches over to one of the 3 endings. So let's actually take a listen to this. I've got somewhere here. I'll get my logic session going. How about this? Maybe not. I'll get this up here at least. Sorry, logic's moving a little slowly here. Let me just get everything under control. Make sure we can all hear this. Waiting here. There we go. All right. So we have 4 examples here. We'll probably just play a couple of them. And we have a total of 9 files on each one of these. So we have 3 main loops. right? So here's student 1, student 2, student 3, and student 4. So we have 3 main loops, 3 intros, and 3 endings. The reason that it goes in this order is that this is alphabetical order, just how it drops into the track. So, right, so 3 endings, 3 intro files. Again, student 1, student 2, and student 3, and student 4 each have their own 3 intro files. And, over here, main loops. Main loop 0, 1, 2, and 3 for each one of these. Okay, so we will listen to each one, and just to make our lives a little bit easier here, we'll hide those and just pay attention here. Okay, so we have main loop 1, 2, and 3. Each of these are 8 bars. They are set up to loop, meaning that when they reach the end, they will return back to the front automatically, and it will make musical sense. Rhythmically, melodically, harmonically, everything returns back to the front. And we'll take a listen to that here. The 3 intro files, these are meant to build up anticipation and excitement and energy heading into the main loops. So there should be kind of a rise or a build through each one of these intros. Having 3 intros, 3 main loops, and 3 endings allows for different variations, slight variations to harmony, drums, melody, kind of progression overall. And 3 endings. 3 endings, they are meant to end. They are meant to resolve, create sort of a cadence to finish out what was going on in the main loops. So let's take a listen to these. We'll start with our main loop 1 here. Make sure I can hear this and that you can hear this. Let's see. All right, I can hear that. If you would, give me a heads up in the chat that you can hear the music, you can hear my voice, everything's broadcasting together. Excellent. All right. So 3 main loops. Each one of these are 8 bars long. They need to contain drums, bass line, a harmonic progression or chord progression, and a strong melody that develops over the course of the 8 bars. When it reaches the end, it needs to be able to return back to the front. So we got a trumpet, we got some percussion, we got a tuba, and a xylophone playing the lead. Now we'll switch over to main loop 2. You'll hear a slight difference, a slight change. The progression changes a bit, the lead line changes. With each one of these variations, it needs to feel like the same song, comes from the same composition, but it's a part A, B, and C, or it's 3 different variations on a central progression. So the chord progression can change slightly, the bass line, the drums can change slightly, and certainly the melody will create a different variation on each one. Now the challenge here is whenever the music reaches the end of any one of these 3 cues, it has to basically hits a fork in the road, or has 3 choices. It can return back to the front and play the same one over again, or it can go to the front of any of the other 2. And so the endings of each one of these has to be able to tie in to the beginning of the next one. So it often helps to start on the tonic, on the downbeat at the beginning of the loop, so that if they each start on the tonic, you know that wherever you wander off to through the cue, it's always going to return back to that same downbeat and tonic at the beginning of each one of the cues. So it all kind of ties them all together. You might leave it on the 4 or the 5 chord, or to sort of hang there in that last chord of your progression, so that it always feels like a solid resolution back to that first chord. They all need to be at the same tempo. They all should be in the same key. If you make wildly different tempos or go off into different keys, it can be very jarring as it constantly switches back and forth. So same key, same tempo, same instrumentation, whatever the drums, the pattern changes, but the sound of the drums. You should not go from an acoustic kit to an electric kit, or just roll through presets in ultra beat in each one of the cues. They need to be same drummer, same drum kit, different pattern. Same bass line, different. Same bass instrument, different bass line. Change up the progression, change up the melody. You can actually change lead instruments. It's always cool to switch from a brass line to a woodwind line, or a piano line to a guitar line to a synth line. If you want to do that, that's certainly viable. But it shouldn't feel like the entire band is changing. The intros. 3 intros are meant to build up and ultimately transition into each one of the main loops. So here are the 3 different intros. So each one of them build. They're each 2 bars long. They do not loop. They only play through once, and then immediately transition into the main loop cues. Again, they should probably hang on some sort of suspension in the last bar, so that they can resolve back to that tonic and drop back down and start into the main loops. They should use all of the same instrumentation. They should have drums, bass, harmony, melody, same instrumentation as the main loops, so that they transition smoothly. Also understand that main music intro 1 is not always going to go into main loop 1. Music intro 2 might connect to main loop 3. It's all, again, very random. The game allows it to choose any sort of variation and stitch them together during gameplay. So whoever plays, or whenever you play, it will automatically connect to the right one. Or it makes sense if you compose it this way. It's kind of like a musical puzzle where all of these 9 files, beginning and end, have to be able to lock in together. So it can randomly, throwing Pro Tools commands at it, sorry. Go away. So intro 2 can go into main loop 1, intro 3 can go into main loop 2, whatever combination it is. So let's see if I line these up right. Nope. Nope, I missed something. Hold on, I just randomly did that. Pay more attention here. Let's see. That should do it. So it's meant to connect and transition smoothly. There's one thing to point out with this one in particular. Listen, there's a final crash symbol. Or instrument decay that kind of gets cut off in the beginning of the next loop. So you have to watch how the instrumentation transitions, how it all connects together. And that's really where, that's really where the challenge is in all of this, is creating different variations that can be in different parts of the song that can then connect with other different variations. The 3 endings. The endings need to end and resolve. They need to finish in silence. Let's just listen to them first. They all need to finish, resolve the music, whatever progression was formed in the main loops. Needs to resolve that with the endings. So let me just choose one of these endings here. Now, whoops, look at that. My weird backgrounds. There we go. Where did my endings go? Let's do this. Bring this over here. That'll be a little easier. All right. No, that's an ending. It needs to be over here. Right here. So needs to create that finish, create that resolution, and it needs to end in silence. These actually get cut off a little bit at the end. Listen to that final cymbal crash. Gets cut off. Gets cut off. So sometimes there's instrument decay and reverb tails that might ultimately get cut off by the end of the file. We want to make sure that things are edited and tail out correctly. Let's just take another listen here. Let's try this one. Here is main loop 1. So it's a much more kind of electronic, kind of 8-bit drum sound to it. And I'm hearing something else up here. Oh, I'm hearing this. But it has a nice lead line here. Let's listen to all three of these. Listen to how it switches and changes from one to the next. Listen to how it changes and develops in the first half and the second half. So in whatever order that they would play, it would make sense. So let's see, let's listen to these 3 intros. These are, you have to watch out. They should have a little bit more build than these. The problem with these is they don't really rise too much. They're very constant all the way across. They almost sound like 2-bar loops. There's a little bit of like a gliss or a swell of the instrument reverb tail. Or maybe a filter opening. But they should have a little bit more rise and energy through those. And then here's 3 endings. Notice that they do end and tail out to silence a little bit better. They basically have a bar of actual resolution hit at the downbeat of bar 2, and then just use that reverb tail to tail out. And you notice These end quite well. These end pretty well overall. These get cut off a little bit, and these two get cut off. This one does tail out a bit better. So hopefully that gives you some examples, an idea and direction of where to go with this composition. Just a couple more points here that I want to hit on. Let's see. Compose interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. This is a common issue that I hear with these submissions, is that an 8-bar loop should not be a 2-bar loop repeated 4 times or a 4-bar loop repeated twice. There needs to be change and development. The music is going to be repetitive enough as it loops and plays over and over and over again in the game. So you don't want to make it even more repetitive by making your 8-bar loop be repetitive on its own. Transitions, make sure everything transitions from one to the next smoothly. You want to make sure, again, it stays in the same key, in the same tempo. And sometimes I hear like a 12-bar progression that's stuck in an 8-bar loop, and you don't actually resolve. And you have to make sure that the end, the last chord, the last part of your progression kind of will connect properly and resolve nicely back to the front of the cue. I said that a couple of times. Keep the same tempo, same time signature. If there's any sort of rhythmic jumps, it can really kind of throw things off and make it kind of stutter as it jumps around. Continuous loops, avoid gaps and fades and pops and clicks, and nothing. You want to make, not only musically, but looping and bouncing and formatting wise, you want to make it invisible. You want to make sure that the player doesn't actually know that they're stuck in a loop. And then the overall mix. Ultimately, you are in control of the final mix because you are creating both music and sound effects. But you want to watch out. You want to make sure nothing is completely overloaded and distorted or really compressed hard and limited. Leave room for dynamics overall. You want to pay attention to your peak levels and your RMS levels, average levels, to make sure you're getting a solid mix. Nothing crazy panned or nothing with odd use of effects, too much reverb, not enough reverb, whatever overall approach. Just often it's for really wrong kind of or kind of missed elements of the mix. Also, nothing too incredibly low. Sometimes you have it cranked up in your studio and it sounds fine because your speakers are cranked up, but when you bounce everything out, it's these tiny little waveforms. So you want to make sure that your music can compete with all the sound effects in the game. Once you are done with all of your music, once you create your 9 files, you can actually put it into the game and play the game with your music playing. All you have to do is dump the WAV files in the correct location. So you'll get a copy of the game, and if you right-click on the game, you can do Show Package Contents, right-click on the application, and it'll give you a folder called Contents. And inside of that folder, you will find a folder named Data. Inside of Data, you will find Streaming Assets. And inside of Streaming Assets, you will find Music and Sound Effects folders. And of course, I don't expect you to remember that path, but in the assignment, it says Contents and Data and Streaming and Music. There's a Music folder, and you will put your 9 files in that music folder, as making sure that they're named properly and formatted properly. And the next time you run the game will work. It'll play your music. So you should check it out. Don't just trust your DAW. Don't just trust what you bounced out. Play it in the game. See if you run into any issues. Contact with me if you're having troubles. You follow all the directions and it's still not working. Then there's another folder of all the sound effects. These are all the sound effects that you will be creating next week for the game. It has the default sound effects in it so that you have something to listen to and reference, but you'll ultimately be replacing these with your own. The assignment asks you to put your music into the game and test it out. You'll take a screenshot of your Logic session. You don't actually need to deliver the Logic session, you just deliver the WAV files. Just like with a client, you're not going to deliver your Logic or Pro Tools session. They don't know what to do with that. They want the WAV files. So, but I want a screenshot to see your approach and how you actually worked on it. deliver everything, zip it all up, and upload it to FSO. So that should get you started on your game composition for this week. The rest of your games through the month. So 2D platformers, lighthearted. It's kind of meant as a all ages, family friendly game. So your music should kind of reflect that. I guess I didn't really hit on that. You don't want it too dark or menacing or depressing, or keep it lighthearted, fun, and silly. Because the rest of our games throughout the month have different kind of overall themes and tones. Next week is a game called Angry Bots. And it's also made by Unity Games, but it has a much more kind of darker feel to it, where you are a mercenary infiltrating a robot factory. There's all these robots that come out and attack you. Different types of robots require different musical themes, and this game talks more about a concept of ambient and action, or sometimes known as battle and exploration. In lots of games, there's a large period of time where you're wandering around trying to figure out what's going on, what the next thing to do is, and then eventually the bad guy pops out, and whether it's robots or zombies or I don't know, aliens or whatever it is, then you battle them, and there's battle music at that point. And then you go on and you either win the battle or you lose the battle, and you continue on through the game. So we'll talk about how the music shifts and changes in relation to what the game does. So this week, 2D platformer, the overall kind of concept behind it we are following is the idea of intros, loops, and endings. It's a very, very common approach to different types of game setups. Angry Bots does not really focus on intros, main loops, and endings. It instead takes the approach of ambient and action music, which we will get into a bit more. And then your game in the third week is called Palace of Renthalion, which is a pretty big mouthful to say. I'll just call it the Palace Assignment. It is an open world fantasy game. It is kind of in the style of Elder Scrolls or what's popular, The Witcher, or oh man, I can't even come up with League of Legends or World of Warcraft. We can always go with those. Dragon's Age, those types of games out there. Many Legend of Zelda, I could probably go directly with that. And it is an open world fantasy game that is going to mainly be focused on acoustic and orchestral instrumentation. So, and in that game, the player can turn on and off the different pieces of music in any sort of order. So, definitely a new and different, unique approach to the music itself. Ultimately, you are composing music and delivering WAV files, but how those WAV files are used in the game is unique each time. Beyond that, your production technique assignment deals with different looping techniques and bouncing music files. Looping files is extremely important in games, and it is what's going on here? Oh, it's loading up. Sorry. Looping files in games allows you to basically musically sit in one spot before you transition on into the next idea. So this assignment is divided out into 3 parts, and with each part you will go through and do a different looping technique. We'll talk about topping and tailing music files. We will talk about bouncing. Part 2 here is about bouncing MIDI loops to make sure you get seamless audio files. And part 3 is all about making things loop that are not very easily loopable. Things like pads and drones that switch and change often or constantly, really. And so along with this assignment, there is a PDF that goes through step by step of all of these different techniques. And you will be using all of these techniques to loop your music with your compositions each week. So it has you go through the different parts of the assignment, creating and bouncing out different audio loop files. All right, so actually, hold on, let me go right back there. That document, that PDF is like, what is it? Let's see, gotta go find that again. So we've got 65 slides that go through all of the steps of how to create and bounce out your loops properly. You will be delivering a series of files. The looping files means that the end and the beginning of the file connect back together seamlessly, and it feels like one whole constant file that never ends. So that should get you going on the looping assignment. And if you have any questions, we can go over the different techniques as you progress forward. And then finally, you will be creating a game capture of your music working in the game. So once you put your music in the game, you have a Mac application with your music in it that works, and you can distribute that. Probably by the end of the month, you'll have 3 of them, and so you can put those in your demo reel or portfolio. You can post them in Dropbox and share a link, or host them online, or whatever you need to do to distribute them. But people are not always keen on downloading applications and playing them on their computer. So having a video capture allows you to show off your work very, very quickly and easily. So you are going to be using QuickTime to do a screen capture. I believe that at some point in your career at Full Sail, you have created a screen capture. I think they still do that overall, but you set up your screen capture, and there is where did that go? Of course, here it is. I have a PDF that goes through all of the steps of creating a game capture, and you're going to be using an application called Soundflower along with QuickTime to capture everything. So QuickTime by itself is great for recording video, but by default it only wants to capture audio from outside of your computer. And that's probably for reasons of piracy. They don't want people being able to record easily anything that's inside their computer, but of course we made our own music. So you can download this application called Soundflower that allows you to reroute audio inside of your computer. Soundflower is what I use to broadcast Logic and my microphone all together. And you can see my meter bouncing up and down here because it's actually paying attention to Soundflower. And so you will be using Soundflower as like a virtual audio cable. You are going to take the output of the game application and put it into the input of QuickTime to record your audio and video together. So there's a step-by-step guide in installing Soundflower, setting it up as the main audio output of your computer. Then you open up QuickTime, you need to do a new screen recording, and you open up your options and set the input of QuickTime to be Soundflower. So your game, it's basically like an audio cable that goes and plugs from the output of the audio from your game and plugs to the input of QuickTime so that you can record not only the video but the audio itself. So once you get it set up, you can see the meters bouncing, just like if you play the game and watch the meters here. It'll be just the same way. You'll be able to see things bouncing up and down with your music. And once you record everything, once you set it up, you can just click to record the full screen, or you can drag across the window. You want to make as clean of a recording as possible. It doesn't matter really your gameplay, like how you play the game or the content of you don't have to get that. Again, you don't have to get the highest score or a great score or fast time or anything like that. But use about 60 seconds to capture your music. Play through a couple of times, die a couple of times so it plays the endings, and just to show off your music in the best kind of format as possible. You'll want to be able to hear Soundflower, so there's a separate application called Soundflower Bed in order to be able to monitor everything, because your entire output is going just to QuickTime. You want to be able to listen to what's going on, and then you record it. You can. This might make your computer work a bit heavy, because not only does it have to play the game, but it has to record the video also. If the video jumps around and skips or is slow a little bit, then that's okay, just as long as the music doesn't skip or drop out. If you need to, you can change the resolution. You can change the resolution of your screen. Like my screen here in these broadcasts is at 1024 by 768, just so that it can be a little bit smoother and a smaller file size overall. Then you hit record, and once, this is sort of what I mean. You set it all up once, you check it out, see if it works, and then it's just really about playing the game. It can be a bit difficult sometimes. Every once in a while, people have issues with Soundflower or QuickTime and getting it all set up. But that's kind of why we do it in the beginning of the month, to make sure that by the end of it, we can get some solid video captures done. Make sure to demonstrate all the music and sound design. You don't have your sound design yet. You'll have that later on in the month, but you'll have your music in there. Really should be no longer than 60 seconds. That should give you enough time to capture everything. Then you quit out of the game, you stop your screen recording, and then you name it. Name it with your last name, your first name, GCP Week1 Game Capture, and save it and zip it up and send it my direction. Upload it through FSO. Please watch your video. The number one issue when anybody does poorly on this project is because they didn't probably just listen to it to see that there was an issue with the audio. It's either the audio was missing entirely, or they weren't recording the output of the game. Instead, they were recording their internal microphone, and so you hear them breathing and clicking on keys, and their family in the background, and the dog barking, and all sorts of strange things. So make sure that you get watch the video and make sure that the audio is correct. Double check it before you send it off to a client. There's a couple tips to make everything a little bit more smoother or professional. Clear off your desktop. Hide the dock if necessary to give yourself a little bit more screen room. Change the resolution to get a better quality recording. And then you just name everything, zip it up, and send it or submit it to FSO. So that is an overview of your first week's assignments. It's generally how the month will lay out, where we'll not next week because we have next week off, but June 11th, we will reconvene and we will listen to our week one submissions, and we'll talk about the new week's assignments. On Wednesday, we will be talking about the games industry as a whole and different jobs and job titles and who you're working with and working for in the industry as a whole. So thanks for sticking it out. Went a little bit over tonight. I tend to do that in the earlier classes. But again, you can always catch up with the archive if needed at a later time. So if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few. But other than that, have a good afternoon, and I will see you again on Wednesday. Thanks a lot.